What do you do when the truth finally shows up and it doesn't knock? When it breaks through the door like a storm you thought had passed? When it lays everything bare? Not just your past, not just your name, but the very foundation of who you thought you were. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because that's exactly what happened to Prince Harry. And no, this isn't another rumor cooked up by tabloid vultures hungry for clicks. This isn't about whether he wore a Nazi costume at a party or said something controversial in a memoir. This is about something deeper, something far older, something inherited, the bloodline. For decades, whispers have followed Harry like a second shadow. Rumors that Prince Charles might not be his biological father. Some dismissed them, some clung to them. Red hair comparisons, timeline questions, old affairs. But all of it was speculation. Convenient, uncomfortable speculation. Until now, because something shifted. Quietly, privately, and then violently. One envelope, one test result, one truth. And Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, the so-called spare, the rebel prince turned exile, broke down in tears when he read it. The monarchy has always had its secrets. But this one could unravel everything. Not just for Harry, not just for Charles, but for the institution itself. So why now? Why did Prince Harry decide to take a DNA test decades after the rumors first surfaced? Who prompted him? Was it his wife, Meghan? Was it a threat? A blackmail attempt? Or had he always suspected, deep down, that something didn't quite add up? Why does a grown man, a father of two, living thousands of miles away from the palace, suddenly need to know if he's his father's son? The answers are not simple, but they begin with a discovery, a diary, a voice from the past, not quite silenced, finally emerging into the light. And that voice was Diana's. Let me back up, because if you're going to understand what's unfolding now, you need to understand what's always been simmering in the background, barely visible, but unmistakably present. You remember the smile, don't you? Diana's smile. Soft, kind, but always sad, as if she knew something the rest of US didn't, as if she carried a burden that couldn't be spoken aloud. Not in front of the cameras, not even to her children. But she wrote it down. In private pages. In coded letters. In tapes no one was ever meant to hear again. And somewhere inside those records, there's a name. A man. Not Charles. A man she trusted. A man she feared for. A man she may have loved. And it's his name that appears again, years later, when Prince Harry, now in his late 30s, quietly contacts a genetics lab in Switzerland. Not a flashy one. Not the kind celebrities use for paternity squabbles. A discreet lab. One that specializes in privacy and aristocracy. Because even now, Harry doesn't want a headline. He wants the truth. But it's the headline that finds him anyway. Because within 72 hours of the result being delivered, someone leaks it. And when that result lands on the desk of a palace advisor, reportedly during a morning security briefing, the expression on their face is described as ashen. And then the doors begin to close. Phone calls, legal briefings, media silence. But something had already started. A crack, a rupture. And you can't tape over that once the air gets in. So why now? Let's ask again, because the timing is everything. Harry's relationship with King Charles has been strained for years. The Oprah interview, the memoir, the titles, the security disputes. But there was still something tethering them. That quiet paternal thread. Love, maybe. Obligation, definitely. Blood, supposedly. But what if the blood isn't shared? What happens to the entire narrative of the monarchy, of duty, of legitimacy, when one of its princes learns he was never actually royal in the way he believed? And if that's true, how long has Charles known? The DNA test wasn't ordered by the king. That much is clear. But what's less clear is whether he's known the truth for years and kept it buried, like so many other royal embarrassments. And Diana? Did she mean for this truth to come out one day? Or was it meant to die with her? Because here's the thing. If you believe in symbols, if you believe that names, crowns, and lineages mean something, then this changes everything. Harry isn't just the son of a woman who broke royal protocol. He might be the child of a man who was never supposed to exist in the royal record. A footnote. A ghost. And ghosts don't get titles. Ghosts don't inherit. But Harry was never like the others, was he? From the moment he grew up. Always in his brother's shadow. Always the cheeky one, the emotional one, the lost one. He seemed to be looking for something. And maybe that wasn't rebellion. Maybe it was recognition. A search for something truer than the world he was born into. What if that search just ended? What if the man we've watched evolve from a wild teenager into a war veteran, a husband, a father, just learned that he was never the man he thought he was? What does that do to someone? I won't speculate. But I will say this. Tears were shed. And not just by Harry. The revelations that followed were immediate and overwhelming. From palace panic rooms to encrypted WhatsApp groups between courtiers, the monarchy was shaken at its foundation. Not by scandal, by truth. So here's what you need to understand as we go forward. This isn't about headlines or gossip. This is about identity, inheritance, power. Because if Prince Harry is not biologically related to King Charles, then his children, Archie and Lilibet, are not biologically linked to the British throne either. And if the monarchy knew, or even suspected, and did nothing, that's not just a family betrayal. That's a constitutional one. And the silence, the delay, the guarded statements, they only raise more questions. What is the monarchy trying to protect? Or maybe the better question is, who? Because buried in Diana's final diaries, recovered just months ago by someone no one expected, is a hint. A location, a man's name. And that name, well, let's just say it's not unfamiliar to those who watched Diana closely in the late 80s. But before we get there, before we reveal what Harry read and why it broke him, you need to understand the chain reaction this one result set off. Within 48 hours of the test being confirmed, 3 people inside Buckingham Palace resigned. One longtime advisor disappeared. Another was seen leaving the palace in tears. And an emergency meeting was scheduled. With only 5 names on the list. But who leaked the result? Why now? And what was Diana trying to warn about? In a recording she left in 1996, 2 months before her death, we've obtained fragments of that recording. We've also seen excerpts from the newly surfaced diary pages. And what's in them redefines everything. But first, let's go back. Back to the moment that changed everything. The envelope, the unmarked packet, and the look on Harry's face when he opened it. Because what happened next, no one saw coming. It wasn't delivered by courier. There was no royal seal, no signature, no note, just a brown, unmarked envelope. Thick, weighty, almost too plain for what it carried. And that's what made it terrifying. Because when Prince Harry picked it up from the small black mailbox outside his Montecito estate, something shifted. You ever touch something and know it changes everything before you even open it? That was this moment. His security detail didn't know what it was. No one flagged it. It wasn't scanned like most mail that arrives at the gate. Some say it came through a private channel. A contact. A whisper from Switzerland, perhaps. Others say it was delivered by hand. But that part, no one will confirm. And Harry? He hasn't spoken about it. At least, not directly. What we do know is that for the next 4 hours, he disappeared. No cameras. No calls. Not even Meghan knew where he went, according to a close friend. He walked out into the garden, alone, and sat beneath the large oak tree his children often play under. And there, with trembling hands and a heart racing louder than the birdsong above him, he opened it. Inside, a simple white folder. No watermark. No logo. Just 2 sheets of paper. And one result. Here's where we need to pause. Not for drama, but for clarity. This wasn't a commercial DNA test. It wasn't 23andMe. It wasn't Ancestry. Calm. This was commissioned through a discreet medical genetics facility outside Geneva, a place known for serving private clients who need confidential, conclusive answers. Diplomats, royalty, billionaires. In Harry's case, it wasn't just a question of curiosity. It was a final reckoning. A binary answer. Is Charles my biological father? Yes or no. That's it. No gradation. No emotional buffering. Just clinical data, markers, percentages. The kind of truth that doesn't blink. And as he read the first line, his face reportedly went pale. Not red. Not flushed. White. The kind of white that drains from your skin when the floor beneath you gives way. He didn't scream. Didn't toss the paper. Didn't even stand up. He just sat there. Still. Silent. Reading it again. And again. Because it wasn't what he expected. According to a source close to Harry, someone who's been by his side since the early Invictus days, he wasn't fully convinced the rumors were real. He'd heard them, of course. Who hadn't? The media has been obsessed with comparing photos of Harry and James Hewitt for decades. The red hair, the jawline, the height, but it was always noise. He'd even joked about it in private. But deep down, he needed to know, not for the press, not even for Charles, but for himself, and for his children, because one day they'd ask. And what was he supposed to say? So he took the test, and when the result came back, the word excluded sat on the page like a gunshot. That's how paternity labs phrase it. Excluded as biological father. Not no, not unlikely. Excluded. Cold. Unmistakable. Final. The man who raised him, scolded him, hugged him after Diana's death. The man whose name he carried, whose bloodline gave him privilege, title, and pain, was not his father. And everything shifted. It's hard to explain what happens in a moment like that. You're not just rethinking your past. You're reconfiguring your future. Harry reportedly didn't move for an hour. Then he stood, folded the papers back inside the envelope, walked to the house, locked himself in his study, and cried. We're told by someone inside the Sussex household that Meghan didn't knock right away. She knew something had changed. She waited, gave him space. When he finally emerged, his eyes were red, but his voice was clear. He said 3 words. They were right. No one asked what he meant. They didn't have to, because he wasn't talking about the tabloids. He was talking about the voice that had been whispering inside him since he was a teenager. The one that asked too many questions. The one that wondered why he never quite fit. Why his father seemed warmer with William. Why courtiers whispered things they thought he couldn't hear. And now that voice had a name. Truth. But it didn't bring peace. Not yet. What do you do when you find out your life was built on a lie? When the people who were supposed to protect you, shield you, may have known all along. Did Charles know? That's the next question Harry asked. According to the same source, his hands were shaking when he picked up his phone. He didn't call his brother. Didn't call his therapist. He called his lawyer. Why? Because what you do next, after learning you're not the son of the king, it matters. Legally, financially, and politically. And maybe, just maybe, this was never just about paternity. Maybe it was about inheritance, protection, identity, and legacy. Because if Prince Charles is not your biological father, but you've spent your entire life being told that he is, what happens to your titles? Your children's titles? Your place in history? Harry didn't have those answers yet. But someone else might. Someone who hadn't spoken in decades. Someone whose name appeared on another page, buried at the bottom of the test summary. A reference sample match. That's the detail most people missed. Because paternity tests don't work without something to compare against. Which means, someone submitted a second sample. Another man. A man Diana had written about, confided in. A man the press had speculated about briefly, then discarded. Because he wasn't famous. He wasn't political. He was something else. A presence. A shadow. And now, his name was back in play. But not as a rumor. As a possibility. The palace, meanwhile, was quiet. Too quiet. Because within 36 hours, someone inside the royal communications team had been briefed. Not publicly, not even officially, but something moved. We've reviewed internal message logs and email metadata that show unusual communication spikes between 3 departments: Royal Communications, Legal Affairs, and Security Intelligence. Same timestamp, same night. And the next morning, 2 high-level advisors called out sick. Coincidence? Maybe. But another curious thing happened. An unnamed palace staffer was seen entering the Queen's Gallery entrance carrying a locked case. Not unusual, except the case was previously seen leaving Windsor just a week prior, carried by a geneticist. No one's confirming what was in it. But if you're connecting dots, it doesn't take much to guess. A second set of results? A control sample? Or something Diana left behind? Back in California, Harry made another phone call. This time, to someone we didn't expect. Someone who hasn't appeared in the headlines much in recent years. A former royal equestrian trainer. A man known only as Benedict in court documents. More on him later. But for now, understand this. Harry wasn't just spiraling. He was investigating. Privately. Quietly. Because he knew once the story broke, and it would, he'd lose control of the narrative. And if he was going to reclaim his truth, he had to act fast. But before he could move, the envelope was leaked. That's right. Just 3 days after Harry opened it, An anonymous source forwarded a scanned copy of the test summary to a European tabloid's editorial inbox. They didn't publish it. Not right away. Instead, they forwarded it, quietly, to a royal contact. And from there it spread. Within hours, at least 4 senior royals knew the result. And one of them, according to multiple sources, contacted King Charles directly. Charles's reaction? We'll get to that soon. But first, something else happened. Something unexpected. Because the day after the leak, Harry received another envelope. This one wasn't from a lab. It was from a lawyer. Not his. The palace's. And what it said, well, let's just say it didn't offer comfort. Because the monarchy had just been thrown into an identity crisis, and they weren't going to let it spiral any further. But the letter didn't contain denial. It didn't say Harry was wrong. It didn't even dispute the results. Instead, it made a request. 3 lines. Cold. Formal. We urge discretion as the Crown considers the appropriate steps. Your cooperation is expected. No apology. No explanation. Just expectation. And that's when Harry knew this wasn't just about him anymore. It never had been. What he did next would make things much worse. And much more public. Because 2 days later, a journalist received a voicemail. The voice was familiar. British. Male. Tired. But clear. I have Diana's diary. And it doesn't match their story. He was never meant to be remembered. Not publicly. Not in the way other men in Diana's life were. Not like Hewitt. Not like Charles. Not even like Dodi. This man. He was different. Quiet. Always behind the curtain. And that's exactly where Diana kept him. Not because she was ashamed, but because she was afraid. Afraid of what would happen if the truth got out. But the truth has a strange habit of waiting. And in this case, it waited inside a box. A small, battered lockbox that hadn't been touched in over 2 decades. It sat beneath layers of files, photos, and trinkets, hidden in the corner of a country estate owned by one of Diana's oldest and most trusted friends. The key had been missing for years. Until now. Because after the DNA test result leaked, after the monarchy began circling its wagons, someone opened that box. And inside it was what no one expected to find. A diary. Diana's final one. Not the tapes that Andrew Morton used. Not the sanitized versions Kensington Palace allowed biographers to see. This was raw. Personal. Scattered with half-finished sentences, torn pages, and deep, uneven pen strokes. Some of it barely legible. Some of it shockingly clear. And in the middle of it all, a name. Repeated. Over and over. Not Charles. Not Hewitt. A different name. But before we say it, let's take a breath. Because context matters. You need to understand what Diana was going through in the months before her death. We often remember the glamour, the landmine walk, the red carpets, the paparazzi flashes. But in private, she was unraveling. Not in a way that makes headlines, but in the quiet, gnawing way that only women in gilded cages understand. She was lonely. She was frightened. And, more than anything, she was protective of her sons. Especially Harry. William was the heir. Shielded. Educated for power. Kept close to the firm. Harry? He was different. Freer. Wilder. And Diana loved him for that. But she also worried about him. Because he saw things. He asked questions. And he didn't hide his emotions like his older brother learned to do. In one entry, dated late May 1997, just 3 months before her death, Diana writes, Harry looks at me sometimes as if he knows I'm hiding something. But how can I ever tell him? How could I explain that some truths are too dangerous, even for a mother to say out loud? And then, below that, she writes, he deserves to know, but not yet. Not until they're both gone. They, of course, referring to Charles and someone else. It's unclear who. Maybe the Queen. Maybe the institution as a whole.